Tom Bower sat calmly at the Invictus Games, simply doing his job as an investigative journalist, when Harry and Meghan's formidable PR team purposefully walked up to him on camera and essentially attempted to physically and psychologically intimidate him into leaving the premises. If you watch the raw footage of that encounter, Bower absolutely doesn't flinch. He absolutely doesn't apologize for his presence, and he doesn't even really engage with their aggressive posturing. He just sits there completely unbothered, wearing a highly specific expression, a look that screams he intimately knows something they really desperately do not want him to know. And after 4 grueling years of relentless investigation, it turns out he absolutely does. Because Tom Bower didn't just rely on palace rumors, he checked both specific hospitals personally. He aggressively hunted for the records, and he found absolutely no medical documentation, no concrete proof whatsoever that Archie or Lilibet were ever physically born in those specific facilities. After all that exhaustive time and research, he now confidently states he knows the actual hidden reason Meghan Markle will absolutely never allow a simple DNA test. And it is absolutely not what most casual observers think it is. Before we dive deep into the incredibly granular details of this investigation, if you are new here, we meticulously break down the complex royal stories and timelines that simply don't quite add up. So, please hit subscribe to my channel so you absolutely don't miss the next explosive breakdown. Now, let's critically examine exactly why this specific, massive claim from Tom Bower is fundamentally different from all the other noisy speculation and internet gossip out there. Tom Bower is absolutely not some random guy shouting on a YouTube channel. This is a highly respected, veteran investigative journalist who has spent his entire formidable career meticulously investigating incredibly powerful, dangerous people, prime ministers, ruthless billionaires, corrupt politicians. He wrote a comprehensive, explosive book titled Revenge, often mistakenly referred to as Betrayal in some circles, though the investigative rigor remains the same, and that specific book represents 4 long, exhausting years of intense forensic investigation directly into Harry and Meghan's operation. We are absolutely not talking about his personal opinions or unverified social media speculation. We are talking about hard, documented evidence painstakingly gathered from highly placed palace insiders, senior medical professionals, top-tier publishing sources, and highly private communications that most mainstream, access-dependent journalists absolutely never even tried to access out of fear. And when his dedicated investigative team physically traveled to the prestigious Portland Hospital in London and then later made the long journey to Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital in California, they were looking for exactly one specific thing: the undeniable, mandatory paper trail that absolutely every single legitimate birth leaves behind. Verifiable doctor confirmations, official medical records, electronic timestamps, attending staff names. Absolutely all of it should readily exist for any legitimate documented birth occurring inside the British royal family. And exactly what they found at the Portland Hospital was absolutely nothing solid. What they found at Santa Barbara was exactly the same, a complete void. Absolutely no clear, verifiable medical confirmation at either location, and absolutely no verified paper trail at either hospital. Tom Bower boldly put that explosive finding directly into his published book under his own name, intimately knowing precisely what publishing it meant for his legal liability, and exactly what the massive consequences of putting it in print would be. And that is exactly where the story starts to get genuinely, incredibly strange. Because when you actually go back and critically look at the exact wording of the official palace birth announcements, there is a highly specific phrasing used that almost everyone completely missed at the time. Both official birth announcements deliberately use the exact phrase, "born for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex," absolutely not born to them, born for them. In precise, proper English, especially the highly formal English utilized by the royal court, children are born to the people who actually, physically carry and deliver them. Children are born for people who receive them through other, entirely different arrangements, such as surrogacy or adoption. That highly specific, bizarre phrasing appeared prominently in both official announcements, originating from two completely separate communication sources. Tom Bower sharply noted it in his research. Lady Colin Campbell loudly noted it in her broadcasts. It explicitly appeared twice, and absolutely nobody in mainstream establishment journalism asked a single, probing question about it. It is exactly the kind of glaring linguistic slip that seasoned investigators absolutely live for, because people rarely pay close enough attention to the exact words they use when they are frantically trying to manage a complex, deceptive story. However, the Palace Communications Office is staffed entirely by elite professionals who intimately understand the massive constitutional weight of absolutely every single syllable they release. They absolutely do not make sloppy grammatical mistakes like that. They absolutely do not accidentally choose highly specific language that deliberately opens the door to massive constitutional questions regarding the line of succession. And yet, it undeniably happened twice. Two massive announcements, two entirely different communication teams, the exact same, highly peculiar phrasing. That is absolutely not a simple coincidence. That is a deliberate legal pattern. And then there is the explosive government document that Lady C actually ordered directly from the General Register Office, a certified official copy of Archie's UK birth record. This is absolutely not a fabricated tabloid story or a rumor. This is a certified legal government document, and exactly what is printed clearly on it is something the Sussex PR machine simply cannot logically explain, regardless of how incredibly hard they try to spin it. The official date of registration printed clearly on that legal document reads exactly May 1st, 2019. Now I need you to sit with that specific date for a second. Harry and Meghan officially told the entire world that Archie was born on May 6th, 2019. That is exactly 5 full days after the official registration date printed clearly on the government's own certified document. So, Tom Bower asked the incredibly obvious question publicly and directly, exactly how does a child get officially registered before he even physically exists? And the UK Registrar's Office confirmed the absolute legal answer incredibly clearly. Pre-registration of a birth is absolutely not possible under any circumstances for any person in the United Kingdom. This is strict, uncompromising British law, and it carries absolutely zero exceptions for anyone, entirely regardless of their royal title, their celebrity status, or their powerful connections to any royal palace. You absolutely, legally cannot register a child who has not yet been physically born. The entire system is designed specifically, rigorously, to prevent exactly this kind of fraud. That is the entire, fundamental purpose of the strict registration process. And yet, the document undeniably exists. It is certified, it is official, and chronologically, it is completely impossible. So, that is the very first massive, glaring problem. But it gets even weirder when you critically look at exactly how the physical registration process actually happened behind closed doors. Every single British parent receives a highly specific red book at the hospital the exact moment their baby arrives. It contains absolutely every verifiable medical detail of the birth, the exact time of delivery, the precise weight, the signatures and names of absolutely every attending medical professional present in the room. It is the mandatory foundational document you are legally required to present to the registrar when you officially register your child in the United Kingdom. Absolutely no substitutes are legally accepted. Absolutely no exceptions are made for anyone. But when the official registrar incredibly traveled directly to Frogmore Cottage to formally register Archie's birth, which was itself already a deeply unusual, highly irregular break from standard protocol, she was absolutely never once shown the required red book. What was actually placed in front of her instead was a simple, handwritten affidavit signed by Harry's personal protection officer. And crucially, it was an affidavit featuring a massive legal disclaimer written explicitly into it, legally releasing that exact same officer from absolutely any legal responsibility whatsoever if the information contained within it ultimately turned out to be completely incorrect or fraudulent. Let me say that exact detail again because it is staggering. A security protection officer, absolutely not a medical doctor. A handwritten personal note, absolutely not an official hospital medical record. And the terrified registrar essentially had absolutely no real choice but to simply accept the highly irregular document and leave the premises. If that is not a massive, screaming red flag, I genuinely don't know what is. That is absolutely not how any legal birth registration is supposed to work in the UK. And the undeniable fact that it happened exactly this way for a child sitting directly in the line of succession to the throne should have instantly triggered massive, aggressive questions from absolutely every single newsroom in London. But it didn't. And that deafening media silence is a massive part of the story too. And then we must analyze the bizarre timeline presented in Harry's own memoir. This is the specific part that always completely gets me, because it absolutely isn't coming from a hostile investigator or a disgruntled palace source. It is coming directly from Harry himself, written explicitly in his own hand, published in his own highly publicized book, and sold to the global public for millions of pounds. In Spare, Harry vividly describes Meghan receiving 2 full epidurals, enduring a highly difficult and medically complicated birth, and then miraculously being back home at Frogmore Cottage within exactly 2 hours of the delivery. That impossibly tight 2-hour window necessarily includes a drive from the hospital that takes roughly 1 hour and 10 minutes in each direction. So, Harry is explicitly telling the world that Meghan had 2 massive spinal epidurals, physically gave birth to a child, and was magically walking and sitting in a van headed home within an hour of delivery. Tom Bower explicitly put this highly specific timeline directly in front of absolutely every single medical professional he consulted during his exhaustive investigation. Every single doctor and midwife gave the exact identical, unequivocal answer: physically impossible, absolutely zero chance under any medical circumstances whatsoever. And frankly, absolutely every woman watching this right now already intimately knows the absolute truth of that statement from their own lived physical experience, entirely without needing a highly paid medical professional to confirm it for them. You simply do absolutely not wear stark white clothing mere hours after giving birth. That absolutely isn't a petty fashion observation. That is hard, physical evidence grounded in the undeniable, lived experience of absolutely every mother in the audience who recognized the glaring impossibility of the image immediately. The human body absolutely does not recover that miraculously fast. The human body absolutely does not move that fast after 2 epidurals. And absolutely no amount of slick palace PR spin can ever change basic human biology. Now, Tom Bower has aggressively returned to one highly specific recorded moment repeatedly, because he firmly believes it is the single most revealing, damning thing Harry has absolutely ever accidentally said in public. Go all the way back to those very first, chaotic days right after Archie's birth was announced. Harry stood nervously in front of the flashing cameras, looking visibly, intensely uncomfortable, and clearly selecting absolutely every single word with obvious, extreme, strained care. And then, he accidentally said it. Babies change so much in 2 weeks. Archie had allegedly, officially been born only a mere 2 days before that specific interview. He was supposed to be a brand new, fragile newborn, and Harry looked directly, confidently at those cameras and casually described a developmental process he had been personally observing for considerably longer than the official palace timeline possibly allows. Meghan, standing right beside him and grinning, immediately, sharply corrected the massive slip. 2 days, 2 weeks. Absolutely nobody in the press pool followed up on the glaring error. Nobody asked the obvious question. Nobody investigated the massive discrepancy. Tom Bower absolutely did not miss it. He carefully isolated that specific damning clip, played it back repeatedly in television interviews, and pointed directly to it as the exact moment Harry accidentally told the absolute truth. Because normal people absolutely do not mistakenly describe a 2-week-old baby's development when their first child was supposedly born exactly 2 days earlier. They just fundamentally don't. The human brain simply does not make that highly specific kind of chronological mistake unless the actual lived truth is something else entirely. And here is the absolute most glaring thing that truly stands out in this entire saga. Harry and Meghan have absolutely never once officially commented on the surrogacy or birth allegations. Not one single official statement of denial, not one aggressive lawsuit filed against a single person making these massive claims publicly over multiple years. Absolutely not one legal cease and desist letter sent to absolutely anyone, anywhere. Tom Bower states this simply and directly. If absolutely any word of this were untrue, absolutely every person making these massive claims would be aggressively dragged into a courtroom immediately. That is exactly what genuinely innocent people do when massive, damaging lies are publicly told about their children. They fight back fiercely. They aggressively defend themselves. They easily produce the required medical documents and permanently end the conversation. Harry and Meghan have done absolutely none of that. Not against Tom Bower, not against Lady Colin Campbell, absolutely not against any of the numerous journalists or royal commentators who have repeatedly, loudly raised these fundamental questions. The absolute silence is absolutely not nothing. The silence is the absolute only real answer Harry and Meghan have ever actually given on this highly sensitive subject. And in strict legal terms, total silence in the face of highly serious, damaging public allegations is obviously not absolute proof of guilt, but it is absolutely a deliberate, calculated choice. And it is a choice that loudly tells its own devastating story, and that finally brings us directly to the DNA test question, which is exactly where Tom Bower's ultimate conclusion gets incredibly, legally interesting. Because a standard DNA test only medically confirms genetics, it confirms egg and sperm donors. It absolutely does not legally or medically prove exactly who physically, bodily gave birth to a child. British royal succession law rigidly requires that heirs absolutely must be born of the body of the royal spouse. This is ancient, centuries-old constitutional bedrock that explicitly exists for exactly this highly specific kind of situation. This constitutional requirement is precisely why Meghan will absolutely never allow a simple DNA test to happen. The massive, looming question is absolutely not just whose DNA. The massive constitutional question is exactly whose body. One simple test could easily confirm Harry as the biological father and Meghan as the biological mother, and it would still absolutely not confirm that Meghan physically gave birth to either child herself. So, even if they triumphantly took the DNA test and published the results, it absolutely wouldn't answer the specific legal question that actually matters for retaining their place in the line of succession. That is exactly why their total silence is so incredibly strategic. That is exactly why the official documentation is so incredibly murky and impossible to verify. And that is exactly why Tom Bower's massive investigation focused so heavily on the hard physical evidence, the specific hospitals, the missing Red Book, the impossible registration dates, the physically impossible timeline printed in Harry's own book. Because absolutely all of that hard evidence points directly to the body question, absolutely not the DNA question. A simple DNA test would be a massive, highly effective PR distraction. It would successfully give them a massive global platform to triumphantly say, "Look, we proved absolutely everything to the haters," while the actual core constitutional question remains completely, entirely unanswered and unaddressed. That is the exact massive PR trap they desperately want absolutely everyone to blindly fall into, and Tom Bower has completely, stubbornly refused to fall into it. And then there is the incredibly disturbing story of what actually happened with the late Queen Elizabeth. Tom Bower speaks about the Queen's involvement with particular, highly visible anger. The Queen explicitly, formally requested that her own, highly trusted personal physicians be physically present at Meghan's birth. She made that royal wish known incredibly clearly to the couple. Meghan flatly, aggressively refused the request. Those specific royal physicians are absolutely not simply highly qualified, elite medical professionals. They are undeniably the absolute most credible, unimpeachable, independent witnesses available absolutely anywhere in the entire country. Meghan deliberately chose to have absolutely zero independent, verifiable witnesses present in that delivery room at all. Think deeply about that for a second. If you were legitimately giving birth to a royal child who would instantly be sixth in line to the British throne, and the Queen of England herself specifically asked for her own trusted doctors to be there to ensure everything went smoothly, why on earth would you aggressively say no? What possible logical reason could there actually be to outright refuse that incredible level of elite medical care and absolute independent verification, unless you specifically, desperately didn't want any independent verification of the event? It simply doesn't make any logical sense. Unless, of course, it makes absolutely perfect sense when you deeply consider exactly what Tom Bower is actually alleging happened. The Queen absolutely was not asking for overbearing control. She was specifically, legally asking for necessary verification, and Meghan said no. That aggressive decision alone absolutely should have raised massive alarms in absolutely every single corner of the palace. And according to Tom Bower's sources, it absolutely did. And then there is the birth of Lilibet. She was allegedly born in California, and the birth was announced entirely, exclusively through Harry and Meghan's highly controlled personal communications team. Absolutely no British doctors were present. Absolutely no official palace medical bulletin was signed or released. Absolutely no traditional golden easel was placed outside Buckingham Palace, and there was absolutely no royal medical oversight of any kind at absolutely any stage of the process. Furthermore, Church of England records explicitly connected to the highly publicized California christening reportedly showed absolutely nothing. No official entry, no registry, absolutely no formal acknowledgement received from any bishop or archbishop's office anywhere in the world. A formal royal christening is absolutely not just a nice family party. It is a highly specific constitutional act that formally, legally connects a royal child directly to the Church of England and the Crown itself. Without that specific, verified record, Lilibet's legal connection to the monarchy is constitutionally incomplete. And the specific California doctor who allegedly delivered her abruptly, permanently closed her entire, lucrative medical practice exactly 2 weeks after that highly publicized birth, with absolutely no announcement and absolutely no explanation given to anyone. That's absolutely not suspicious at all. It is exactly the kind of bizarre detail that sounds exactly like cheap fiction until you actually verify it, and Tom Bower rigorously verified it. Now, Tom Bower also confirmed something else that explains a massive amount about exactly who is actually, financially behind Harry and Meghan's operation. He explicitly revealed in his book that their highly publicized Colombia trip was completely, secretly funded by the Soros Foundation. The Colombian vice president actually accidentally leaked this highly sensitive information herself. Harry and Meghan went to absolutely extraordinary, desperate lengths to keep that specific, highly political financial association completely hidden from the public. During the trip, Meghan changed into highly expensive outfits 4 to 5 times every single day, with direct purchase links attached to absolutely each outfit for her own personal commission. They reportedly left approximately a mere $8,000 behind for charity, which was a tiny, almost insulting fraction of exactly what the vice president had actually been expecting from a massive royal visit. Harry appeared visibly, deeply more unhappy than any royal observers had absolutely ever seen him. Tom Bower astutely noted he clearly did absolutely not understand what was happening around him, and he absolutely does not speak a single word of Spanish. So you have this massive, highly publicized trip that was supposedly entirely about charity, secretly funded entirely by a massive political foundation, with Meghan aggressively monetizing absolutely every single outfit change, and Harry looking completely, utterly lost. That is the exact pattern. That is exactly how this entire Montecito operation works. The public is loudly told one glowing story, and the gritty behind-the-scenes reality is something entirely, completely different. And then there is the incredibly sharp insight from Princess Anne. Long before the spectacular royal wedding even happened, Princess Anne bluntly told a close friend that Meghan was deeply gripped by red carpet fever, and that absolutely nothing would ever deter her from her relentless, desperate search for the global spotlight. Tom Bower confirmed that this highly specific, chilling prediction proved to be exactly 100% right in absolutely every single detail that followed over the chaotic years. Tom Bower also confirmed, through multiple highly placed palace insiders, that Meghan genuinely, truly believed she should eventually be queen, absolutely not Catherine. She simply could absolutely not understand exactly why she was positioned further down the royal pecking order. A highly respected establishment figure reported directly to the Queen before the wedding even took place that Meghan genuinely believed once she successfully married into the royal family, she was eventually going to be above absolutely everyone. That single, staggering, narcissistic belief, according to Tom Bower, ruthlessly drove absolutely everything that followed. Harry's vindictive book was deliberately written and finalized entirely during the Queen's fragile lifetime. He had absolutely no hesitation whatsoever about viciously attacking his 96-year-old grandmother in print while she was still alive and grieving her husband. Tom Bower chose one highly specific word for that action: treachery. She sat directly across from the revered Queen of England, and she lied directly, flawlessly to her face. Tom Bower has absolutely no doubt about that, none whatsoever. And earlier, I promised you Tom Bower's single, absolute, most precise psychological conclusion about Meghan Markle. 4 exhaustive years of research, hundreds of highly placed sources, boiled down to exactly one devastating sentence. This is exactly what he wrote and published under his own name. Victimhood was Meghan's religion, the justification for her aggression. That is the exact, precise lens through which absolutely everything else finally makes perfect sense. The intense, bizarre secrecy around the births, the aggressive refusal to provide standard documentation, the glaring lack of independent medical witnesses, the bizarre timeline that absolutely doesn't add up biologically, the total legal silence in the face of highly serious, career-ending allegations. Absolutely all of it flawlessly fits the classic pattern of someone who ruthlessly uses victimhood as both an impenetrable shield and a sharp weapon. She absolutely cannot answer the simple, factual questions because actually answering them would completely destroy the carefully constructed narrative. And the narrative is absolutely all she actually has left. Every single time someone simply asks for basic proof, she loudly calls it a malicious attack. Every single time someone simply asks for standard medical documentation, she immediately calls it targeted harassment. Every single time someone simply points out the glaring, impossible contradictions in her own stories, she aggressively calls it racism. The victimhood is absolutely not a response. It is the entire calculated strategy, and it has worked incredibly well for years simply because most people are entirely too afraid of the backlash to push back. Tom Bower is absolutely not afraid. So, here is exactly where we finally land. Tom Bower has spent 4 grueling, expensive years tirelessly working on this massive story. He visited both specific hospitals personally. He read absolutely every single document available. He sat calmly at the Invictus Games while their aggressive PR team actively tried to intimidate him, and he absolutely did not move a single inch. After absolutely all of it, he arrived at the absolute simplest, most undeniable conclusion possible. One simple DNA test, one single afternoon, absolutely every question answered permanently and forever. If the children are genuinely biologically theirs and born of her body, one simple test completely ends this exhausting story forever and instantly silences absolutely every single question ever raised by anyone. They absolutely know that, and they still absolutely will not do it. That is absolutely not about protecting privacy. That refusal is the answer. And until Harry and Meghan finally provide the verified, standard documents featuring a real doctor's signature, until they finally logically explain exactly how a child was legally registered 5 entire days before he was supposedly physically born, until they address exactly why absolutely no standard red book was ever shown to the registrar, why absolutely no independent medical witnesses were present, why the explicit timeline printed in Harry's own book is biologically and physically impossible. The massive looming questions will absolutely never go away. Tom Bower has made his unwavering position incredibly clear. Lady Colin Campbell has made her unwavering position incredibly clear. And the total, deafening silence emanating from Montecito remains the absolute loudest, most damning statement of all. The line of royal succession is absolutely not a private family matter. It is a highly strict constitutional one, and if the mandatory legal documentation simply doesn't exist, then the children's actual place in that line is legally, fundamentally incomplete. That is absolutely not mere gossip. That is absolutely not wild speculation. That is the strict, unyielding law, and the longer they stubbornly refuse to answer, the clearer the actual answer inevitably becomes.